I'm noticing as a counselor that I'm having a lot of the same conversations with parents and with students. And so it kind of got me to thinking, like, as a parent, y'all have your perspective with your kid. And then you probably, share ideas or talk to other parents and you get their perspectives too. But it's hard for you to know, like, what is going on as a whole. That's where I feel like I could come in, as the trends that we're seeing across the board with this age level. And I know it's hard. Like, I talk to parents all the time, and, sometimes they're discouraged and they feel like I'm the only one dealing with this particular situation, or I'm struggling to navigate this problem. But I'm here to tell you, you're not alone in that. There is a lot of struggle. The struggle is real. And so I hope that you leave today with maybe some things that are brought to your awareness, but also with some useful tips that can help you in having conversations with your child to help them to be safe both mentally and physically. So we will talk a lot about internet safety. We'll talk about gaming, social media, mental health, because that is a big thing that we're seeing at this age group. But I also want to spend some time before we get into that talking a little bit about emotional regulation, because that's important too. As a counselor, I go into classrooms once a month, at least once a month, and I teach foundational emotional regulation skills to all kids. I have more of a proactive approach to things because I find that whenever I go in and I teach the kids these things across the board, then whenever they are having an issue, we're able to reinforce the things that they've already learned. You can't teach emotional regulation in the middle of a meltdown. You have to already have that foundation. But also, it's important to know that whenever a child is emotionally dysregulated, like they're in that fight or flight meltdown mode, they're not able to access their thinking, logical brain, nor are we, any human that's in that mode. When your emotions are escalated, you are not able to access the part of your brain that you need to be able to problem solve situations. So what I teach the kids, or what I try to teach them, is that, of course, it's not wrong to be angry. It's not wrong for our emotions to be escalated. We're human. It's not wrong to be frustrated. That those emotions are normal. But we have to practice the pause between the emotion and the reaction. And that's where our power lies. Because in that pause is where we can get ourselves to a calm place so that we can come back and solve the problem when we can think clearly. So that's something that I'm working on teaching them, that maybe you can continue those conversations at home. And so every student has been given a folder in counselor lessons. We call it their counselor folder or their counselor lesson folder. I give them different coping skills each month that they are going to add to those folders. So maybe ask your students about their counselor folder. I've asked them to put it in their backpack so that they can keep it with them at all times. So like if you need your coping skills at home, if you leave it in your desk at school, then you're not going to have it. Or if you left it at home and you're struggling at school, you're not going to be able to pull those out. So I would encourage you to maybe have them pull out their folder and talk to you about some of the things that they've learned, because that also reinforces it when they're having to kind of teach you the lesson. Then they can kind of recall the things that they have learned. But also, emotional regulation, the important thing about that is it is a skill. Just like any other skill, it has to be taught, it has to be modeled, it has to be reinforced, and it has to be practiced. It's not something that's just like a one and done. You go in a lesson once a month, you teach it, and they've got it. Just like math or reading, it takes practice and it takes reinforcement. And so that's where whenever those things happen, like when you notice that they need to utilize those skills, having them to articulate to you what's going on. I'm trying to encourage kids to communicate with their words and not their behavior. Because a lot of times we don't see that they're dysregulated or that they're struggling until we see the behavior. But if they can communicate, like I'm at a level 3 on my emotion scale, or I'm at a level 4, we call those I statements. If they can communicate that to you, then you can be like, okay, so this is a good time to practice the pause. Let's pull out your counselor folder and see what coping strategies you can use in this moment. And then once they're at a calm level, then go back to the conversations. Because if they're escalated and you're trying to solve a problem right then, that's not going to work if you haven't noticed. It's just going to lead to frustration on your end, frustration on their end, and you still have this problem that's unsolved. But in the moment, you could maybe say something like, all right, I can see you're upset. we're coming back to this conversation. We're not getting out of the conversation, but we're going to approach it whenever we're at a calm level and we can think clearly to problem solve. And then once they are calm and they can articulate that to you, I'm back at a level 1 or 2, then that would be a good time to go back to the problem. Definitely go back to it. Don't just sweep it under the rug. It's just the timing of it all. And so the more you do that and the more you're reinforcing those skills at home that they already have the foundation for, the better they're going to get at it. It's kind of like with kids that have, struggles like dyslexia or whatever learning struggles. We still have to teach them to read. We still have to teach them the skills, but they have to practice it a lot to be able to get better. And the same is true of emotional regulation skills as well. We have these little calming kits. If you were at the breakfast event last year, you probably got one. But I'm going to be sending one with y'all each today. But it has some little coping strategies in these bags that you can maybe use as having like a little mini calm corner that you can implement at your house. And you can always add to it things like coloring books and different things like that to where, if you're in that frustration level, maybe like, okay, this is a good time. You go to your calm corner, I'm going to go to my corner, and then we're going to come back in 5 minutes or set a timer. So that might be an option as well. So you'll each get to take these home today and maybe kind of set that up with your kids. And the PTO helped me with packaging these up last year. And we decided to actually expand this project. So we're in the process of every classroom teacher here on our campus is going to have a calm corner for their room. We are just waiting for all the things to be delivered. It's all been ordered. We've gotten bean bags. We've got 20 bean bags coming for all the teachers. We have these little cubes that are going to have, I'm going to put some a clipboard in there that's going to have some color sheets, some feeling, emotion thermometers. They're going to have some fidgets and just different things that they can use in the room. Noise canceling headphones are also going to be in there. I have been going into classrooms and doing lessons on bullying, cyberbullying, kind of how we treat each other, and those types of things. So 4th grade, I've been into all 4th grade classes as of yesterday. I will be going into 5th grade classes Monday and Tuesday of next week. And I am telling y'all, I had like 100% engagement on this lesson. Like they were all in it. They were interested in this because this is stuff that they deal with and this is stuff that they see. I am not here to tell you whether or not your child at 9 and 10 should have a cell phone. That is not my job to make that choice for you, nor is it any other parent's job to make that choice for you. That is a personal decision, and it's a decision that you make that's best for you and your family. But I feel like having some education and some awareness would help you to make decisions as far as establishing boundaries when it comes to those things. Technology is not going away. Cell phones aren't going away. We live in a digital world. So I think the important thing is learning how do we navigate it safely? How do we teach kids to use it responsibly? And, how can we monitor their activity on it to make sure that they are safe? So when a 9 and 10-year-old has unfiltered access to the internet, you are fighting a war with dopamine. You're setting yourself up for a fight with dopamine, and that is not a fair fight. And let me tell you why. So dopamine is a neurotransmitter in our brain. It's also known as like the feel-good hormone. Well, things like social media, gaming, apps, all those types of things, they create large spikes of dopamine deep within a child's brain. Okay? Large spikes of dopamine cause like a magnetic pull of the kid's attention to these devices. And it makes the brain think that specific activity is more critical than other things that may not give off as much of a dopamine hit, such as doing homework, eating dinner with your family, going and playing outside, completing a task, those types of things, because they have that spike when they're on those activities. So that's where the pull is going to be. So one of the things also to be aware of at the age of preteen years, neurologically, children are not developed enough, their brains are not developed enough at this point to be able to have the self-control that's needed to have control over their behavior and their emotions when they're exposed to a lot of the things that are on the internet. For example, the gaming, the cyberbullying, the behaviors that are negative that are modeled for them, things like pornography that are, they're exposed to it sometimes. All of those things, even like filters that are skewing beauty standards, that's what they see and that's what they think is normal. I have more children in the last few years that have struggled with their self-esteem than I've seen in the 16 years I've worked as an educator. And even so, like, I've also dealt with most of the situations we deal with in the admin team here at LCI have to do with the root being starting with a cell phone. And whether it's like social, emotional problems or cyberbullying situations, it usually starts there. But neurologically, they're just not at the developmental age that they can resist that pull without supervision. And they are not at the age where they can have the amount of emotional control needed to know they need to step away from those things on their own, because they're not going to do that on their own. They have to be, it has to be modeled and it has to be supervised. Some of the things that I've seen as I've done some research for this event have really frightened me. And I told the kids yesterday and the day before, I said, I want you to raise your hand if you are in like Roblox, if you play online gaming, Roblox specifically. And I know there's others, but that's the most common one that I see. So that was what I asked. Y'all, like almost every hand in each class went up. I have a video where I was videoing that lesson, which I will later post, but I was counting, and I think I counted like 17, 18 out of a class of 22. But that was the norm in every fourth grade class that I went to. Maybe like 3-4 hands went down. So that's like close to like 95% of fourth graders are spending a lot of time in that environment. So what I told them, I said, do you see a lot of inappropriate things or cyberbullying, those types of behaviors? Do you see those in Roblox? And they were like, yeah, we do see that. Some of them did say they have parental controls and they have mics turned off and things like that, which I highly encourage. And so I told them, I said, there are a lot of inappropriate things on there. There's a lot of cyberbullying that happens on there. And then I told them, and they kind of flipped out over this. It's like, you know how I know that? Because I signed up for Roblox a couple of weeks ago because as your school counselor, I want to see what you're seeing and what you're hearing. And man, have I seen and heard some things that are quite shocking. And so then, of course, they're like, oh, okay, what's your username? No, that's not the point. I said, I'm not there to be friends with anybody. I'm not communicating with anybody. I am only there to observe. So I will enter into servers, and it might look like I'm just like walking around, and I'm just, sometimes even my little avatar is just standing there like I would be in real life, like, oh my gosh, and so I'm looking at the chats. I'm listening to all the things that are said, with the mics turned on. And it's horrifying. And I would like to, in just a moment, read to you guys some of the descriptions of some of the games that I've screenshotted. If you go to my personal Facebook page, you'll be able to see some of them. But I have several that weren't in that post that I want to share with you. Because when I started to really dive into it and enter in and out of these servers, like, well, no wonder kids are treating each other like this. No wonder they're bullying each other. No wonder they're having such big emotional reactions because they're getting cussed out in their ears nonstop. Because they're hearing people say things like, go kill yourself. Because they're hearing sexually explicit language at 9 years old. And that being exposed to that nonstop, it's going to affect how they think, it's going to affect how they feel, and it's going to affect how they behave. And I told the kids this yesterday. And I said, I am not saying no games. That's not what I'm saying. I am saying that we though need to put boundaries in place, because if that's all we're exposed to, then it is going to start affecting how we treat other people. And so I'm looking at things like, they're role-playing things like school fights. They're role-playing, there's one called something about a presentation where the whole goal is to be as disruptive as possible. There are so many violent games where the whole purpose is to shoot as many people as possible. And I'm not talking just like war games or, shooting bad guys. I'm talking about like role-playing shooting innocent people. The number of games that I am seeing in Roblox, and they're aged at 9+ or all ages or 13+. And it's like, why is this okay to market to kids? And I've entered some of those games. I'm like, okay, I'm going to just see what this is all about. Sure enough, you can pick up, assault rifles and take people out. And it's like, that's what they're role playing. And then if they're role playing these behaviors, how can we expect them to come to school and have empathy for people, to respect their teachers when they just role played how to be as disruptive as possible in a class, or how to respect other people's property when there's a game on there called Rob Mr. Rich's Mansion, where you're going to try and rob this rich guy because they're being trained on these behaviors. And it's like just mind-boggling to me. Now, there are some games on there that are pretty benign, that are innocent, but there's a lot that are not. So with that, I want to say, if your child is on Roblox, and I don't know if this is a popular take, but I believe that you should also be on Roblox, kind of doing that, going into just seeing what's available and seeing what they're playing. If your child is on TikTok, you should be on TikTok to educate yourself and know what they're being exposed to. There has been a lot of times where I have had to inform parents where their child was creating like hate pages and blasting people in comments and causing a big drama war on TikTok. And this multiple years in a row, I've had this exact scenario, and I've talked to the parent, and they have no idea how TikTok even works. And so I'm having to explain what the algorithm is. I'm having to explain, what's going on in TikTok, and they're shocked, of course, and horrified that their child did this, but they weren't paying attention. They weren't monitoring. And again, remember, a child is not neurologically capable at this age to have the self-control needed to be like, this isn't okay, I need to take a step back from this. Or this is bad for my mental health. This is not good for my behavior. They're not gonna have the mental capability to do that without the help of their parents. And so I kind of laid that foundation for y'all in these lessons. As I'm talking about this, I asked the kids, do your parents have a right to put restrictions on your cell phone and know what you're doing? And they agreed after this talk, yes, that they do. And so we also talked about cyberbullying situations. There is a law called David's Law. And I don't know if you can maybe research some of this, but several years back, it was named after a child named David that took his life because of cyberbullying. So his parents had gone into legislature, and they had laws passed that make it to where there's harsher consequences for bullying and harassment. So that's what makes it too. In schools, we have to address these things as they come up, and we do address these things. But we're seeing an uprising, an uptick in this. The more that 9, 10, 11-year-olds have cell phones, the more we are seeing this type of behaviors. And so I end up having the conversation over and over with the kids is, do you pay for your cell phone? I'm like, no. It's like, no, you don't, because you're a child. Your parents do. Your cell phone is in their name. So let's say you decide to make a bad choice, because I've seen even good kids. I have seen this time and time again. Even good kids get caught up in group chats and peer pressure and make bad choices and send mean messages to somebody, or they send a message to somebody they don't like. If another parent saw that, and I tell the kids this, if another parent saw that and got tired of that behavior and decided to go file harassment charges because somebody is cyberbullying their child, that's outside the school's hands. We can't control that. But also, those legal consequences could fall back on the parent because the cell phone is in your name. So that's another reason why it's very important to pay close attention to what these kids are doing on these cell phones. Relational aggression is very common at this age group. I do lessons on that. That's where, they're trying to fit in. They're trying to find where they fit. Oh, she looked at me wrong. Or, what if they're talking about me, and their self-esteem is just so low at this age, and they're learning the skills to socially navigate situations. That's what this age group is mostly doing, is learning how to navigate social situations. But think about how that's being modeled for them. The social situations that are being modeled are those terrible things that they're hearing in their ears, the trash talking that they're hearing. And so we've had a really big problem with kids coming to school roasting each other, as they call it. And a lot of times it goes really far. Like they get brutal. They attack their insecurities. So we had just recently, me and the principal and assistant principal, we had a talk with the whole student body. We're like, roasting is not okay here. We're not doing that. Because what's happening is we're roasting people, but really we're getting brutal with it. And then what we're doing is we're bullying people, and we're just calling it a different name. And that's not acceptable here. So we have set that ground rule that roasting is not allowed on this campus because it often does go too far. I've dealt with so many situations where somebody's crying, somebody's feelings are hurt because of something somebody said that always started as a roasting situation. But also, I've talked to kids about their automatic response when they do say something mean is usually, I was just joking. It was just a joke. And I'm like, but whether you're joking or not, you are still responsible for the words that come out of your mouth. So we've had a lot of conversations about that, is that saying we're just joking is not going to get you out of consequences. You will still be held accountable for the words you say, whether you were saying it in a joking manner. Because that's just like the knee-jerk reaction of most of the kids is, oh, I was just joking. So that's normal for this age to struggle socially because they don't have the experiences yet to be able to navigate those situations. But then when you throw cell phones in the mix, and we have situations where group chats are started. I'm unraveling those almost weekly, group chat situations or cyberbullying situations. I spent 4 hours of my day the other day just dealing with a group chat situation. And because, you have to call in all the students, you have to communicate with the parents, and you have to make sure that everybody understands that this is not okay. And that's just one group chat. There's lots of group chats out there. So if your kid has a cell phone, I highly encourage you to check those group chats. One of the situations that I dealt with a while back was a situation that a parent was alerted because her cell phone, she gets alerted if her child gets a message, any message. So her child was not with her phone at the time, but the mom kept getting buzzed over and over and over. She looked at it and she saw the messages and realized that it was out of control. And so, but her awareness of having that setting on her phone is what caught it and what allowed us to deal with it before it could get out of hand. I mean, it was kind of out of hand, but we were able to handle that situation. But they get in these group chats, and like I said, I've even seen good kids that, they'll take a screenshot of something that they see on the internet or somebody's picture or somebody's video. They'll post that in the group chat, and then they'll start just, ragging on that person, making fun of that person. Or they'll start calling each other names. And, they get really brave behind a cell phone. They'll say things that they would never say in person. And they're usually not so brave whenever they're in my office and Mr. Rideout's office and Ms. Hallman's office with having to face screenshots that have been emailed to us. So, that does happen. And I just want to encourage you to maybe figure out how to set your phones to where you can be alerted when their phones are, when they're getting messages, or periodically just go through their chats, go through their group messages. I've even had situations, I told the kids that if you're in a group chat and it gets mean, you need to try to get yourself out of that chat. Sometimes it's just innocent stuff, but then sometimes it turns mean. A lot of times it turns mean. And I said, you need to alert your parents to let them know, and you need to see how you can get yourself out of that. And if you can't figure out how to leave the chat, get your parents to help you leave that chat, because you don't want to be associated with that. You don't want to be throwing out the popcorn emojis. I've seen that too, where somebody's not saying something mean, but they're throwing out popcorn emojis like they're watching a show. They're agging on the behavior. And it's like, this is not reality TV. This is real people that you go to school with. This is not the virtual environment. This is real people that have real feelings. But I feel like they're so desensitized because they're role-playing things like violence, aggression, bullying, disruption, all the things that they're spending time in. They're role-playing those things. But then we expect them to come to school and have empathy, be respectful of their teachers, not get into fights, not treat people badly, not say inappropriate things. And so that's where that monitoring comes in. So I've encouraged the kids, like, if you're going home and you're spending your entire evening gaming, that might be a little much. Talk with your parents about setting boundaries. Like, maybe I'm going to do this for 30 minutes or an hour, whatever you decide. Maybe even another option that you could do if gaming is an issue is set a time and then have them have to bank that time through the week. Like, okay, if you use all your time Monday through Wednesday, well, it's going to be a pretty boring weekend for you because you've already used up your time. And then that kind of teaches them some time management as well. I've got this allotted amount of time throughout the week, and I can split it up however I decide, but if I overdo it, then I'm going to have to spend the weekend with no game. And so that kind of puts it back on them to be responsible. But also, we're noticing that there's a lot of overstimulation with these games. It's stimulating their brain, and it's just like their brains are constantly firing, and then they come to school and then they can't deal with the boring tasks. They can't deal with sitting in a classroom and learning because it's not as stimulating as those games and apps and things that have that magnetic pull for those dopamine hits. It's like, oh yeah, my teacher's talking, I gotta finish this assignment, whatever, like that's not as big of a deal to them when there's that magnetic pull that they're so focused on. I have some kids that come to school and they're falling asleep. They can't stay awake during the day because they stay up all night on their phones. And I also would recommend that they not have their cell phones when they should be in bed. Like if it's 3 o'clock in the morning, they shouldn't have their phones in their room. Like in my personal opinion, based on some of the things that have happened, a lot of this stuff happens while the parents are asleep, when there's no supervision. We go in a classroom, we don't turn our back on the kids. We got to supervise them because, you don't want things to happen while you're not paying attention. And then also the predators are also out late at night when they know kids are not being supervised. Which brings me to my next point. One of the most terrifying things about Roblox, besides the content that's marketed to young kids, is the fact that when I signed up, I was just like, I want to see what age it'll let me sign up at. I put in like I was 9 years old, because like a lot of our kids here are 9. I just want to see what it will let me do. It let me sign up like I'm 9 years old. I'm 38. Okay, so I was like, well, that's a little bit frightening. I had a friend of mine also just sign up to see what it would let her do and put in her regular age. She's 32. She was able to send me a direct message where it thought I was 9 and she's 32, and she could that easily chat with me. I was like, oh my goodness, that's terrifying. But then I noticed that at 9, it says, okay, if you want to access certain content, you have to be 13 plus. So, or you have to have a parent PIN to be able to unlock it. It's like, all right, fine. So I went back into settings and I changed the year. Did a little mathy math. Okay, I'm going to be 13. So now it thinks I'm 13. And I can just go access any of those servers and go in there. I'm not 13. And I told the kids this. And I feel like some light bulbs went off in this conversation with 4th graders yesterday, because when I asked them, I said, why is that dangerous? Why is it dangerous that it was so easy for me to change my age on these games? At first it didn't click. And they're like, because, somebody could cyberbully you, or because, like, their answers were innocent. They weren't clicking. They weren't getting it. Until I finally said, if it's that easy for me to change my age, can any bad guy in the world go in there and pretend to be a kid and try to get information from you? And then the light bulbs went off. They're like, oh, yes, yes. And that happens. There are predators that will go in and pretend to be kids. And because kids want to belong so much, that these predators will go in, they will start to realize what games they're playing, what their interests are. They'll strike up conversations with them about their interests. There are voice changers on there to where they might think they're actually communicating with a kid. And if you go up and look up certain news stories where kids have been trafficked and kidnapped based on a relationship that started on Roblox, it's horrifying. And so I would encourage you to turn off the chats. Like, unless they're playing with, I told them, unless you're playing with somebody that you know in person, you should not be communicating with anybody that you do not know, because they may not be a kid. They may be some 40-year-old guy in his mom's basement across the world, trying to get information from you. And I have asked the kids too. I've had them ask, raise your hand if anybody on the internet has ever tried to ask you personal information. A lot of hands go up. It happens. I've had a kid just yesterday say, somebody asked me for my address. I didn't give it to him. I left the server. Good for you. But what if he didn't? What if he did give him his address? Because again, they're 9 years old. They don't have the ability to snap that this person may not have my best interest at heart. Especially if they're pretending to be a kid and they feel like they have a friend. If it's a kid that already feels like he has no friends or she has no friends, and this person is giving them positive attention, the group grooming that can happen in these apps, it makes my stomach turn. It really does. And also the fact that when I'm entering some of these chats, I'm seeing such sexually explicit things that no 9-year-old, 10-year-old should ever see. I couldn't even bring myself to post the screenshot of it on the Facebook thing that I did on my Facebook because it was just too much. And there was already one that had inappropriate language, and I already felt uncomfy posting that, but I like, parents need to see it. But that one was too far. I couldn't even bring myself to post it. And there are community guidelines on there, but people will put like special characters over the letters to get around those community guidelines. So you can see exactly what they're meaning, but they get past they work around it. And, just kind of hearing in the microphone, you have little kid voices saying very adult things. And I'm like, mind blown. And then I'm like, parents need to know this. And, and I know it's disheartening to think about, but it's the reality of the world that we're in. So I would like to read to you guys some of the screenshots that I have. Don't worry, I'm not going to repeat the inappropriate things, but you can look at it if you want to later. There's one on here, it's an unnamed shooter. And I'll walk around for you to see the image, but it has like a Roblox character with an assault rifle. This guy hiding behind a filing cabinet. It's rated for ages 9+. And it says in the description, just a basic shooter. Okay. There's another one that's called Bloodful. Welcome to the Bloodful game. In this game, you can test realistic ragdoll physics. There's blood options. You can play with blood or without blood. There's School Fight. Fight in a school. You can hang out with friends or cause trouble. This one is one that's related 13+. It's called Spin Down. It's basically like Russian roulette with a revolver. It says players will take turns shooting a revolver loaded with blanks and live rounds. Use unique cards and quick thinking to outlive your opponents. Ages 13+. Today we're going to rob Mr. Rich's mansion. He has had a major upgrade to his home from the last robbery, so it's going to be tough to rob it the second time. Okay, so we're role-playing being criminals. That's nice. Okay, color or die. Stand by the wall that is your color, or you die. It's like a scary image. Another one that's just like a basic, I'm going to try and blow it up here, Roblox character with an assault rifle in a neighborhood. Seekers must find and eliminate all the props within the time limit. So your goal is to eliminate people. I've actually heard kids, when they got really upset, use the word eliminate. I was trying to eliminate him in a game in PE. And they fly off the handle because they can't handle losing a game in real life because they're so used to being in this world. So that word eliminate, I have heard with my own ears from 4th and 5th graders. And that's a word that I noticed as I was entering these games is used a lot, to eliminate. This one's called death penalty. Sentenced to death, you have been given a chance of freedom by being subjected to various experiments. Your survival will be based on luck and your ability to control those around you. The presentation experience. Welcome to the funniest school role play game. You can either hold a presentation or interrupt someone else's presentation. You can spend your Robux to do actions like cough, fart, scream, rage, party, earthquake, and much more. So let's role play being disruptive during, for teachers that are having to teach or any presentation that's being given to you. Death row. Your crimes have sentenced you to the worst fate. You are sentenced to die on death row. Cut your friends in line to die first or troll everyone by causing a lockdown. Secret killer. One player is chosen as the monster to eliminate others. Survive the killer. Kill as many players as you can before they escape, before time runs out. Entry point. Take down banks, break into black sites, and target multimillionaires. And then eliminate others to level up. It's just nonstop. Like there's one that just has a Glock pointed at somebody's head. Just a regular guy, not a criminal. I don't know, maybe he is a criminal. It doesn't matter. But just that's what they're being desensitized to, violence. And I'm sitting here thinking, it would not surprise me because there's some of these where they're going around a neighborhood shooting people. Who's to stop somebody from having a school setting? Where we're role-playing school shootings. It's not much different than that. And we're in a world where school shootings happen, and then it's like there's 9 and 10-year-olds role playing that behavior. And parents have no idea that some of this is happening. So that's why I'm having this conversation with y'all. That's why it was on my heart to share this, because of the behaviors that I'm seeing across the board, and you don't know unless you know. And you're only dealing with your kid who may not play these games, but they may have entered the server at some point, or they may have friends that do. So it would be good to have these conversations of why that's not okay, why we don't want to play those types of games. But even the innocent games, there's lots of innocent games on there too, but don't you think predators can enter the innocent games just as much as they would the violent games? Probably even more so, and that's prime time for them, okay? And so we have to protect them physically, protect them mentally. It's so, so important. And, I don't want to leave you on a note that's discouraging. So I want to talk about, what can we do about this? How do we handle this? Well, I think one of the biggest things is conversations. They need the conversations because they want to talk about it. I can see it. I had a line of kids. I was backing up out of the classroom, and everybody wanted to share something with me. They want to talk about it. Now, we only have so much time before, the teacher has to continue with their lesson. I'm in there for about 40, 45 minutes, but they all had things that they wanted to share, and they want to talk about it. So I would say, maybe start with that. What kinds of things do you see when you're on this game or when you're on this app? Have you ever noticed anybody that's doing inappropriate things or inappropriate behaviors? And that way they'll know that they can tell you those things, because a lot of times I find that kids don't want to tell their parents because they think, oh, I'm not going to be able to play anymore. They're just going to take it away from me, so I'm not going to tell them anything. So by starting these conversations, and like I said, I'm laying the foundation of that in our lessons, so you can kind of pick up from there. Be like, okay, I told them this is like a counselor lesson for parents, is how I framed it to them. And so I thought, whenever I told some of the kids, I said I'm recording it, so I told them they could watch it later too with their parents if their parents couldn't come. I said, how many of you want your parents to see this information or want them to come to this event? I had a lot of hands go up. I was worried that kids would be like, I don't want them to go because Ms. Barnes, nobody's going to have a cell phone by the time Ms. Barnes is done with them. But that wasn't the case. They want you to know these things. I think that they realize that it's affecting them, but they don't have the self-control to navigate it. They don't have the skills to navigate it. So start with some conversations. What are you seeing? What are you hearing? And how can we figure out to make sure that you are not exposed to those things? What games are you playing? Let's talk about the games that are okay to play and the games that are not okay to play. And, the things that desensitize them to poor behavior. If they're having struggles with their behaviors, make sure they're not role-playing the things that they're doing, because that could be a big part of it. Because then we come to school and we teach empathy, and I teach, other things, but I'm also competing with that happening, as well. And it's it's like they're getting conflicting messages. So that's something that's important as well. On the yellow page, it says establish what websites, apps they're allowed to use. Okay, so have that clear boundary of this is what's allowed, this is not allowed. I will tell you, Snapchat, it causes a lot of problems because things disappear and they have this sense of I'm invincible, I can do and say whatever I want, nobody's ever going to know, it's going to disappear. So a lot of things happen on Snapchat. So you might want to keep an eye out for that if they are on that. Talk with them about privacy. Remember, tell them don't ever share any of your personal information. I told the kids, I said, would you go up in the Walmart parking lot and hold up a sign that says your name, your address, your parents' name, what time you're home alone, where they work, and all this? They're like, no, because that wouldn't be safe. And then I said, but don't you think that there's more bad guys online than there are in the Walmart parking lot? And so it was kind of like a light bulb moment for them. And that even if somebody seems like a kid, they may not be a kid. Discourage your child from talking to strangers online. Help them set up their privacy settings on devices, websites, and apps. So the ones that they do use, go in and look at those settings, see what parental controls are allowed. There are parental controls on Roblox. There are things where they have to put in a PIN number that's emailed to you for you to go in and unlock for them to be able to access things. So I would highly encourage going and setting those up, and also going in there and looking at the chat features. Look at the messaging part. Make sure that they're not messaging somebody. Go into their group chats. Look at what they're doing. And you have a right to do that because it's your cell phone. So I tried to make that clear as well to them. Monitor their use. Talk to them about the websites they're using. Do some research. Know what the possible dangers are. The only way I learned this stuff is by signing up and going in it myself. And I'm glad I did, because I knew it was a thing. I knew most of our kids here played it, but I had no idea the things that they were being exposed to. I was just seeing a lot of the behaviors and a lot of the words that they're using. And then when I go in there and I look at that, I'm like, makes sense now. I mean, that's not the only reason, but it's a big contributor to it. Model the behavior you want them to practice when using the internet. I wouldn't let them play things that, like, where that chat is just unlocked without you hearing it. Like, maybe if they don't have headphones on to where you're hearing what they're hearing. So that, because that's a lot of the times they have headphones on, so the parents have no idea the content that is in their ears. Tell them if there's anything that makes them feel unsafe or uncomfortable, that they need to tell you about that it's okay to tell you about that you can help them work through that situation. And maybe create a contract agreement together regarding internet safety, which is on the back. So this could be like kind of some talking points that you could start with. Like, these are the devices that I have access to. Things that I'm not allowed to use on my device are, write it out. Places I am not allowed to use on my devices are, go over that with them. And then this is kind of like a contract agreement. You know, like we have these agreements that they sign on following the code of conduct. Or if you want to use your cell phone, here is the contract agreement that you're going to have to comply with in order to have the cell phone that is actually mine, not yours. Okay? So these are the rules that we're putting in place. First of all, privacy. I will share all of my passwords with my parent, guardian. Their passwords are your passwords. I will not ask for or give out any personal information, such as my full name, address, phone number, passwords. If I'm being asked to give this information out, I will talk to an adult to make sure it is safe. I understand that anything I post on the internet can stay there forever. I will respect other people's privacy by not posting any information about them or photos of them without their permission. That happens a lot. They think anything's fair game. Somebody posts something on the internet. We've had people screenshot stuff just off of other people's Facebook pages, and then they're getting slammed in group chats. So we have to respect that's other people's image. That's not yours to do with whatever you want. I will give my parents or guardians my device whenever it is asked for. Because again, it's your device. It's not theirs. Responsibility. I will take care of my device, including keeping it charged. I will not use my device to do something mean or inappropriate. I will respect myself and others. And if I do not follow these guidelines, this is going to be the consequences. We're not having this conversation when we're in the middle of a meltdown. We're having this conversation before the meltdown. We're having the conversation before the behavior happens so that we're all clear. This is what's going to happen if you violate this contract. So then when that happens, well, you can pull that piece of paper back out and be like, okay, this was our agreement, you know, and then this is what the consequences are, and that's what we're going to follow through on. And by doing that, it is teaching them responsibility. It's teaching them there is a code, there are rules that we're going to follow, and that it's not just, the internet's not all fair game for me to do as I please. Like, we have to have some restraint. And so you're teaching them that restraint by clearly establishing those expectations and boundaries. A lot of kids at this age say, I have anger issues. I don't think they even know what that means, but they say it. And sometimes they say it as an excuse to their behavior. I have anger issues. Okay, well, everybody has anger, first of all. We all do. We have anger. It's a normal human emotion. The issue is that you have not practiced the emotional regulation skills that you need to manage the anger. Anger's not wrong. It's your reactions that you have to watch out for. And so we have that conversation, but I'm also reading research that says digital gaming can trigger aggression in adolescence. It can trigger aggressive thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. If they already struggle with emotional problems, and then this on top of it, it exacerbates it. Exacerbates? Yeah. Makes it worse. It's like, did I say that right? It makes it worse. There are connections to anxiety, depression, sleep issues. The longer individuals are exposed to violent video games, the more likely they are to have aggressive behaviors, thoughts, and feelings. You know, we have to recognize that these kids that already have those issues and have those struggles without the internet being thrown in as a factor, how much that makes it more of an issue. And so again, they're not going to have the self-control and the capability to be like, oh, I need to pull back on this. I need to rein this in. If y'all ever notice, like sometimes adults can't even handle social media? Yeah? So how do we expect a 9-year-old to have the self-control to do it? So we have to help them. We have to teach them. We have to model it. There are skills that will last them as they grow up. You know, they're going to be going into junior high. Well, if you've already established this foundation, that's going to be one less fight that you're going to have to fight as you go on to junior high, okay? There's going to be plenty of other fights to deal with. I taught junior high. I taught 7th grade for 8 years before I was a counselor. I enjoyed it. I loved it, but it's a whole different world. So when I'm seeing some of the struggle already here, I think, ooh, junior high is going to be a problem for this kid if we don't get some of this stuff under control. So that's where, you know, a lot of that comes in, is just managing their behavior, their time, teaching them what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, because they don't know unless you teach them. They don't know. I didn't know this stuff was going on Roblox unless I go in there and see it for myself, because I didn't want to just depend on, oh, I saw this TikTok video of somebody saying this. I wanted to have firsthand experience to share with y'all. If you would like a copy of the handout on internet safety, you can either just reach out to me through email, or I will have some copies placed up at the front. On the back is the contract that you can go over with your child. Thank you so much.